Quentin, we filmed your car, I think maybe 3 years ago.
I think so, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Took it for a bit of a drive. Now that was just after you ran at Swan Hill. I think you ran from memory a 7.4.
741 was the best we did. Yeah, 185 I think.
Out of what looks like a pretty basic street car. It doesn't look that exotic. It's a built engine, but it's not that exotic compared to what some other people are doing with the LS platform, is it?
No, well, we're going to pull it down now. It's broken, and everyone can see what's actually inside. So.
Well, we probably should back up a bit there. You just had it at Heathcote, and yeah, it finally called a day. How many runs have you done on this engine, roughly?
356 passes and about 28,500 Ks on the street.
Wow, wow. And for the people who sort of aren't familiar with your car, just give us a basic rundown of what it is.
Yeah, sure. 74 Holden Torana. It's a 400 cube LS, twin turboed. We run TCE converter, Paul Rogers Turbo 400. Just good fun street car that we race. So.
Yeah, and one thing obviously is pretty obvious here. You've still got the plastic manifold. I think that's a 90mm throttle body, is it? Factory GM.
Yeah, it's all. This is the thing that's probably surprised a lot of people over time. Yeah, a lot of factory parts. Still factory LS3 fly-by-wire throttle body, plastic intake manifold. There's still LS3 heads. Nathan Higgins has CNC'd them. You know, LQ9 block, and then the internal we'll get to see.
All right, well let's get into it. Now this is the reality of pushing the limits of a street car. What sort of power is it making to run that 7.4?
The most we've seen on the dyno, we saw 1,400 horsepower at the hubs at Motorex on 24 pounder boost. We ran 741 on 26.5, 27 pounder boost. And then we turned it to 28 and a bit pounds of boost, and it power wheeled and we had to pedal, and then we didn't get to run another pass. Look, somewhere 1,800-ish at the crank maybe. So probably pushing the friendship a bit, but it's held up for this long, and it finally gave the ghost up. As you can see, I've got the timing cover off it already. The crank's not happy. This happened at King of the Street on one of the passes.
I don't think it's supposed to be like that, eh?
No, it's definitely not supposed to be like that. So the crank's broken, but I have had the intake manifold off and the rocker covers off, and I have dropped the sump off it, but that's as far as I've gone. I'm actually really keen to see what's inside. What I was really happy about is it hasn't windowed the block, so I'm really, yeah. All right, well, just to speed it up, that was already unbolted. We just run standard rocker gear, single beehive springs, standard locks and retainers, so we didn't get too exotic with anything. It's always been a single beehive spring.
And this is a hydraulic
roller, yeah, it's got a crow cam in it.
So you were at King of the Street a few weeks ago now, and you ran a pretty easy 7.9.
Ran 7.9.
Off the trailer, wasn't it?
Yeah, 7.9 first pass, just sort of feeling out the track. And then we stuck to 8th mile because that's what I'd entered into. I know the motor's done a lot of work and it's getting tired, and a lot of people have been saying it should have blown up a long time earlier. So it's like anything, you keep pushing the friendship, eventually everything breaks. So, you know, I decided to just run 8th mile, and like a lot of people, I was going to pull it out after this meeting and go over it, but she said, no, you're going to pull it out before the end of the meeting. But yeah, to see what's actually broken is going to be the interesting part. So.
You're not the first person I've heard who said, I was going to pull it out after the meeting and now it's broken.
Maybe it just sounds better. It's always hard to pull the motor out when everything feels fine, but you know, preventative maintenance really is something that we should all be really doing.
You know, and for those that don't know, you've obviously won Drag Challenge a few times in this, which is pretty hard on engines and cars in general. Like,
yeah,
probably the hardest event you can do, isn't it?
Look, there's lots of hard events. It is an endurance race. So for drag racing, which is considered, you know, only a couple of seconds into a race.
For our American friends, Drag Challenge is what you have Drag Week.
Yeah, it's the Australian version of Drag Week.
A series of tracks over a week, and
yep, drive your car, 5 tracks, 5 days. I think we normally do about 1,600 kilometres, so what's that, 1,000 miles, is it?
1,000 miles, something like that, yeah.
For all the American friends. Yeah, we tow a trailer behind it. I take 3 mates with me who crew for me. So you got Mark McCoy, who does all my tuning for all the Motec. Paul Rogers does all my transmission stuff. And Mick Truan, just a good mate, good spanner man. Would not have him there, so he may even turn up today for a bit of a hand pulling it down. So I run 2 different length bush rods just to get the preload right on the lifters. So the Cav Auto push rods. They've been in there since day one.
Yeah.
The only things we've upgraded, we had to do a crank upgrade at one stage. We had just a Kelly's Comp Star crank, and it twisted the crank fairly early on at much lower power, so we were lucky everything survived. But the block, the heads, the crank, the rods, the pistons, the camshaft, it's all original, 7 years old now. Be interesting for us to see how well everything survives. So.
And what model is this crank?
This is a Dragon Slayer, so we upgraded to a Dragon Slayer. So that's broken too, but it's broken at the front, and until I get it apart, I'll see if it's broken anywhere else.
You got a bit of help today, mate.
Yeah, this is my 9-year-old boy, Will. He's definitely becoming more and more interested in helping out. He's one of my biggest fans at the track, aren't you, mate?
Basically.
Yeah, so these heads have been on now for 4 years. We did the 2017 drag challenge, went to Grudge Kings, ran 2 days up there, ran 750s, and it's done a heap of street driving. Haven't done a lot of racing in the last couple of years due to COVID and no tracks being open, so been having lots of cruise time on the streets with mates. I haven't run fire rings or anything like that before. I just run LS9 head gaskets.
Yeah.
I haven't had a problem with them as yet. That's interesting. At first glance, none of those valves look bent. That's pretty amazing considering all the timing chain's smashed. There we go, Morel budget tie bar lifters. They were new 4 years ago when we did the crank. There you go, Luke, that's not happy.
Hey, it's not really sealing there.
No, that's what happens when a piston hits it at 7,200 RPM. Geez, the ring seal's not bad. The motor's been, I would have thought that would have leaked down by now, but. So you can see good witness marks where they've hit. Exhaust valves hit, intake valves hit. So this side definitely copped it a lot harder, which means these lifters copped it harder too. Not broken or anything. Just in good nick, all things considered. There you go, that's the passenger side head gasket. Factory GM LS9 gaskets. Pretty happy, still holding after all those years. Seen 28 pounder boost and about 1800 horsepower.
Yeah, they look all right.
Oh, they're pretty good considering what it goes through. Just a bit naughty. Few teeth missing. To be expected. That'll be a bin job, that one. I don't think that's salvageable. Definitely had some hurt go through it. Just before we pull the cam out, I'm just having a look. You can see, obviously the oil pump's broken, sheared the bolts off the front when the crank's definitely broken. I reckon that looks like some main bearing that's not happy. We'll be able to see what's going on very soon. Now this cam's 7 years old. It's a Crow hydraulic roller. All the engine builders out there will know what's going on. A few skid marks there. Possibly lofting the lifters off the top of the lobes. Oh, there's the bits we need to put back into the motor.
Yep, there's some
Hey,
stuff like that.
reusable.
Yep.
Reused.
Timing chain, all pump spacer you run when you're running a double row timing chain. Torrington bearing by the looks of it, or what's left of it. We run a Torrington bearing in the front of the motor for the thrust. You can hear all broken bits of metal falling up into the motor.
Yeah. Did you pull this off earlier?
I've had the sump off,
Yeah.
but this is as far as it's gone.
Oh, okay.
We tried to undo the oil pump when it was still in the car.
That would not happen.
We couldn't get the counterweight past the number one. The first counterweight's still behind the number one main cap. Bits of oil pump falling out. All right, this is about to reveal everything. All right. These are washers we run under the windage tray just to space it down off the 4-inch stroke crank. All right, what can we see?
How many cranks have you got in there, Quentin?
We've definitely got a problem down the front. Well, it appears all the rods are still attached to the crank. All right, crank doesn't seem to want to move at this stage.
What rods do you run in these?
Kelly's Compstar.
Yep. They've done all right, hey?
They've been in it since day one.
Yeah.
That's been the part that everyone said it's going to throw rods out. Well, it hasn't thrown a rod out the block yet. Well, they're just ARP 2000 series rod bolts.
Yeah.
They've been in there 7 years. It's not ideal when the bearing doesn't stay in there. Hasn't spun. But this motor has run with no oil pressure for 11 seconds. Was rotating over it after it busted the oil pump off the front. That's better than I thought it would be. It's a boy. There you go. CP bullet piston. You can see we've had a blow up. That coating's held up really well. Ryan at Race Coatings did the coating on the pistons. The tops have been coated as well.
You know, that's a good testament, because I did a video on this a few years ago and everyone said that wouldn't last 3 seconds.
Well, if you actually have a look in the motor, you can see the pistons come out the bottom of the bores by a fair bit. So the fact it hasn't come off, look, I did have another company coat the pistons before I knew Ryan at Race Coatings, and it all came off in like the first time the motor ran. It was all in the oil filter and was all gone. So Ryan said, no, it wasn't done right, I'll redo it for you.
That's a good testament to that, isn't it?
And yeah, all things considered. And that's had metal go right through it as well. So that's looking fantastic. So no oil pressure, obviously we're leaning on it, but they're, it's gone through the calico, but again, motors, you know, if it hadn't run out of oil pressure, it'd probably look a whole lot better. So yeah, that number 1 rod's hurting just a bit. You can see the broken crank. How's that? The number 1, 2 big end is still part of the rest of the crank, and it's snapped through the counterweight. And once we get that cap off, we'll see where it's come out the other side. But yeah, that counterweight's definitely slapped the bottom of the number 1 piston, which would indicate why that rod's bent. Probably very lucky it didn't break and throw it through the block, but yeah, these Compstar rods, I don't have a problem with them. They've been a good thing. Oh, that comes off a bit too easy. Missing a bearing. That'll be the crank gear. Oh, here we go. So, and that's snapped right where the Torrington bearing's been machined in. Crank's broken, can't go anywhere, it's still held in place. Flogged the hell, pushed that bearing out, it's got clearance. Counterweight's hit the piston by the looks of it. Bent the rod. No timing chain, valve's bent, that's it. We'll keep tearing it down. Having to use a wobble bar, sucks, but we can't rotate the motor at the moment.
So maybe once you get that one out, it might free up some.
It's hard to tell with the crank, it might have jammed in there, but everything else, we've got movement everywhere else.
Yeah.
So I'd say this is our problem why we can't rotate it. That's the number 2 big end right behind the rod that's been banged. Amazing. There's plenty of shrapnel marks. It's like someone's fired a shotgun in there. That won't buff out. Why not? We can try. Those are sharp bits. Yeah, it's where the crank's definitely done some hammering on the rod. No, they're not going to come out. They're being peened over.
No, that's what I was pushing.
Yeah. Oh, she's going to need a bit of a knocker.
Bigger knocker?
Yeah, a bigger knocker. That's good kink in the rod. Oh, that'd be where the counterweight hit it, at a guess. There you go. I don't know what the limited Compstar rods are, but this thing's copped 1800 horsepower, and that's not because of power, that's because of the counterweight hitting it.
So what's broken first?
The crank.
The crank is the...
Crank's broken. Crank's broken, but it's still held intact with the main cap, I'd say. Well, it was held intact, but couldn't go anywhere, so it's still rotating. then you've got a completely unbalanced thing all supported on one bearing. It's cooked that bearing well and truly, welded to the crank. So that's been slopping around. It's created all that clearance, flogged it around. The counterweight's been hitting the rod and the piston. Well, that's where it's been hitting the rod. There you go.
Yeah.
It's pounded the rod there and bent it. So I think we're very lucky that we didn't snap the rod and didn't put it through the block, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. That feels so smooth. We could just wash that out and put it back together again. Look at the crank journal. That's been very hot, but bear in mind, you've still got the number 1, 2 piston and rod hanging off the front with no support once it's flogged the front. So that's going to be, I would expect you might even see some cracks in the crank there. We'll crack test it.
V6 crank, yeah.
You feel a bit of metal impregnated in there, but other than that, it's pretty good.
Unlike a lot of cars like this, Quentin, yours runs a Motec M150, yeah?
Correct, yeah. Been running Motec the whole time. My mate Mark McCoy worked at Motec for many, many years. Didn't really consider anything else. We just went straight to Motec, and he's done all the tuning and setup on the car and supported it the whole time. So he's gone out on his own now, living in Queensland. He's moved back home to his roots and running his own business, still doing all this sort of stuff. It's I've had to pick up my game and learn a lot more on the phone to him all the time. Poor bloke still hasn't got a break yet, so still helping me out from time to time. And if we do drag challenge again, he'll be into that for sure. So.
Yeah. So you've got up here, this is actually the run.
Yeah, this is
the last run you did.
This is that last run where the motor let go. So I'll run through what's going on. If you can see here, the red line's basically close enough to where we launched, where the vehicle speed starts. So you've got purple line is engine RPM, the blue line's front wheel speed, red one's rear wheel speed. As you'll notice, that where it spikes above, that's wheel spin. Here's boost pressure in pink. Green is my throttle position, so I've had a pedal there. And that's where I've got off the throttle at the end, or before the end of the run. That's G-force as it's accelerating. Obviously when it wheel spins, the G-force drops back off, and as I've had a pedal a little bit late, it started to grab right as I went to have the pedal. The red one's engine oil pressure. We'll come back to that later. And I've just got crankcase pressure as well. So the values are all here on the left for each one. There's a timeline down the bottom, which we've set to 0, so we can see what happens where. The reason I've got a red line right at this point, after I've had a pedal, we're sort of 2.8 seconds in the run. If I just go to the knock control, this will give people a bit of an idea. Anything under the orange line we're not worried about. This is what the knock sensor's reading in each cylinder. And what the ECU does is if it picks up detonation or rattles, knocks, it'll pull timing, and we allow it to pull up to 3 degrees out of each cylinder if it needs to. Obviously nothing at the start of the run. Something's gone wrong at 2.8 seconds and it's making a hell of a racket. As the driver, at that point, I didn't know anything was wrong. The car was still accelerating at G-force. We got wheel spin. We're still in second gear. We launch in second gear, so we're still in second gear. Car's doing, say, 150k an hour. My guess at this stage is it's broken the crank. We've still got oil pressure. We still had ref and sync. Car's coming back up on boost. If you can see that blue line moving. I've shifted gears at sort of 7,200 RPM, a bit over 7,200. We're now 4.4 seconds into the run, 23.8 pounds of boost. Car's making roughly 1,400 horsepower at the wheels at that stage. Problem we've got no oil pressure. It's dropped to 13 pound, as you can see. Now the crank's broken here. As it's flapping around, well and truly clearance that bearing, it's also broken the oil pump off the front of the motor. The oil pump's smashed into 3 pieces. And it also took out the timing chain, which at this point has bent multiple valves. The G-force is down at about half a G here, which it should be closer to 1 G. That's obviously because the motor's severely hurt. Things happen very quick when you're racing. The crankcase pressure, that's all pretty normal for a run. Right at that point where there's no oil pressure, it's also, the oil pump's been thrown out the front of the timing cover, smashed that out. So hence why there's no more crankcase pressure. Yeah, so at 4.5 seconds, the car was still accelerating with G-force until it wasn't. And you can see here at sort of 5.3 seconds, the RPM suddenly drops off. And that's when the engine's gone no more. That's when things are broken and bent and not happy. I've still got my foot on the throttle for about another 1/10 of a second. G-force has dropped off. We're not accelerating. We've got no oil pressure. At that point, we're sort of, 5.3 seconds into the run. The motor's still spinning at 6,000 RPM before it suddenly dives down to about 4. The car's slowing down. I'm trying to stop it. Bit hard with oil over all the brakes. At this point, the diff's now driving the motor. So the tail shaft's turning the back of the gearbox, and the converter's that tight that it's still turning the motor over until we get to about, say roughly up here. So that's just after 15 seconds after we've left the line, and at that point the motor's now stopped completely. Hopefully we haven't hurt the converter as well, but yeah, that's basically the run. What was interesting was all the big end bearings, except for obviously number one, were really good nick, and all the big end journals on the crank were still good. To have the motor still spinning, especially under power with no oil pressure, like you have a look here. As I said, 4.5 seconds, we're still under power till 4.5 to 5.4. So you're talking 0.9 of a second at 6,000 RPM, making 1,400 horsepower at the wheels. The calico bearings that we run, I think, and a nice hard crank surface, we just got away with it somehow. It's quite amazing at that point that it hasn't grabbed and locked up and literally thrown rods out of the block.
Yeah, well, it could have been a lot worse. Like you could have.
Oh, it could always be worse. Yeah, it was.
Could have ended up on the wall. Or
yeah, the car stayed straight. I was amazed, even though there's oil under all four tyres, on all four brakes. Hit the brake pedal, thought I had no brakes at all, and yeah, it was dripping off the wheels when we got back to the pits. So yeah, it could have been a lot worse. So
the big question is, what are you going to do now? Obviously, I know everyone wants to go faster, but it's not that straightforward when you've already got a car that's running, mid to low sevens.
No one wants to go slower. Look, I've got a 6-litre alloy block and a standard crank, and part of me was thinking that path, depends on dollars and cents and what you're going to do. We've had a bit of support in the past with this car, and we've already had a few people say, yep, they want to pitch in and definitely give us some good support, but it all depends on, I suppose I can put a shout out, depending on how much help we can get, will depend on how fast we make the car go when we come back, I suppose. I don't have as deep a pockets as some, so.
Yeah, and at this level, it's not just upgrading the engine. You're probably going to have to upgrade other parts of the car as well to handle what you want to throw at it.
To do it all again exactly the same still costs a certain amount of money. That's a possibility. At least everything's developed and we know what we can and can't do. Spoken to the team, we're all keen to go faster if possible. There's a little bit left in those turbos, especially if we want to go different fuels.
What size are they?
They're 67mm. They're the GTW Garrett's 3884s. There is a little bit left in them, but I definitely need stronger internals. Those, as much as I love my Compstar rods, I'm not going to push it any harder on a set of Compstars. So we'll be upgrading rods.
Oh, they've done very well.
Yeah, looks like we've already got a crank coming from a sponsor and a partial sponsorship of a block. Yeah, I'll put the call out and see what we can come up with, and if anyone wants to help out, any shops. Look, there's a lot of people that like watching this car and seeing what it can do and what we can do with what we've got. So
we might have to do another video piece in the next one together.
Oh, definitely. Like once we know the direction we're going, I'm happy to do another video of it going together. We'll show everyone up front what we've got and then see what we can do at the track. So yeah, awesome. Good thing is TC and Paul Rogers, transmissions are both dedicated to help us out with whatever we need. Paul supplies me my gearbox, backs it, supports it. He's one of the biggest supporters for the car. In fact, everyone that's got a sticker on the car has been a great support. Nathan's been fantastic with the heads. Can't thank him enough for what he's done for me in the past. Ryan with race coatings, internal coatings and all the exhaust coatings, radiators, special thermal coatings on the intercooler and that to dissipate heat. Yeah, it all works. It's all proven itself. So Cav Auto, we get all the parts off Lee Kavanagh and Paul Turner at Cav Auto. That's these guys. They've been a fantastic support. Lee gave me a lot of advice with engine stuff. He's a big advocate for how far you can go with parts, and he's been very, very helpful. So, but might have to hit him up for a bit of advice on what's the next stage from here. Yeah, definitely. So, all right. And I use Joe Samet at JC Engines for a lot of my machining, and my mate Clint Dalton as well. They're the two guys that will be doing all the machining on the engine. They've done nearly all the machining in the past and supported it and been great help. So I'll stick with those people and we'll go from there.